For the most part, 99% of franchises that you launch, even if you started on a full-time basis, they will become part-time and then eventually limited part-time. But
hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Richer Geek Podcast. Today we have Bob Bernotas. Bob is a franchise expert. He's president of franchisewithbob.com. It's a great name if your name is Bob and you deal with franchises. He's one of the nation's top franchise consultants. He's passionate about helping people achieve greatest level satisfaction. He's got years of experience guiding clients toward top performing franchise brands. He has personalized guidance and support throughout the entire process, which is important. Whether you're looking for exit strategies from corporate life or semi-passive opportunity, Bob's here to help you find your perfect match and create a brighter future. Bob, how you doing?
I'm good, Mike. How about yourself?
Yeah, not doing too bad. Just trying to stay cool. So talk about, franchises are all over the board. First, a little bit about your history. What do you do, where you come from, how you got into franchises. Then we'll dig into what you do.
Oh my goodness, I'm not going to delve too deeply into that, but let's see. I grew up on a farm, so I am a Pennsylvania farm boy. Mm-hmm. Learned my work ethic from that at the hand of my dad. But got into franchising pretty early. Begged, borrowed, and stole to get into my first one. It was a West Coast video franchise. If you remember the video industry, they actually preceded Blockbuster, and first one I opened was on Wayne and Shelton Avenues in Philadelphia, and just by sheer luck, I think I got the right location, and that I opened in December of 1986, and that franchise was the top unit in the chain in January of 1987. So that allowed me to move forward and acquire some more West Coast video franchises. I think you know what happened to that industry. Mm-hmm. I fortunately sold at a kind of a good time, so I was able to get out without too much damage. But it was a nice ride while it lasted. Got involved in an independent business that I started, which didn't go as well as my franchise businesses. But then I got involved in another franchise concept called Hollywood Tans, and had a bunch of those in the Maryland market. Sold those to acquire a controlling interest of a larger chain that was based in Sioux City, Iowa. Moved the corporate headquarters to Omaha, Nebraska, because I wasn't about to live next to a pig processing plant in Sioux City, Iowa. But anyway, long story short, we ended up selling that company and that was a tanning salon chain called Tan World. We ended up selling it to Suntan City. And I moved on, and then more recently, I've been consulting for a bunch of years as well, and I acquired another franchise more recently, more of a service-oriented brand.
So let's talk about franchises in general. We can talk about some of the pros and some of the cons, but why franchises? A lot of our listeners do passive investing or general partnership in real estate. And your focus is saying, why invest in real estate? Because franchises outperform them. Tell us a little bit about that and why.
Well, look, with real estate, depending upon the type you get into and depending upon if you're going to manage it yourself, I mean, you're at a different level with hotels. You're running a serious business with real estate. But most people and a lot of the clients that I work with, they have real estate, and it could be, some single family homes, some duplexes, multiplexes, whatever. And often they are either managing it themselves and they're spending a lot of time doing it, or they're hiring a management company to handle that for them. What I've also found with my real estate investor clients is that most are not making money. They don't have positive cash flow because of the debt that they're carrying on it, but they're riding the equity train. And if they got on that train prior to COVID and they rode the 2.5 years during COVID, they're in a pretty good place. But that's an anomaly. That's not always happening. What I like about franchising, why I counsel many of my clients that it might be a better fit for them, is that you can build equity so much more quickly in a franchise business. I'll touch on that in a second. But in addition to that, your cash flow. I mean, if you get into right franchise, the cash flow is infinitely better than what you're going to see from an ROI perspective than with real estate. The If you get it, but you're often trading some of your time for a much better cash flow. With semi-passive franchise investing, meaning franchise companies, certain ones have set up models, and that's the trend in franchising more recently. If you go back 20 years ago, you just did not see that many of these franchises like that. The interesting trend, I'm watching franchise investors that would typically get into restaurants, difficult business, or boutique fitness, or some type of brick and mortar retail type concept, put a manager in place and manage the manager. I'm seeing a shift now from franchise investors from that type of model into more service oriented businesses. The reason being, more and more of these franchise companies have saw the light, and they have developed the tools or the platform necessary to support franchisees at a higher level so they can get into something, maybe spend 10, 12, 15 hours a week getting it up and running. For the most part, 99% of franchises that you launch, even if you started on a full-time basis, they will become part-time and then eventually limited part-time. But the semi-absentee or semi-passive type franchises, they develop the tools so you can start that way. So you can build it. You don't have to necessarily walk away from a high income job. And that was really the focus of these franchise companies. They wanted to attract a higher level of investor that might be earning several $100,000 a year. They're not going to walk away from their job, but they want to start building an exit ramp because they're also working 60, 70 hours a week, can't see their kids, and they know they can't maintain that pace forever, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Because, I at some point, my wife was looking at franchises and she was like, well, and she saw that the different levels. There was like the super cuts where you could just go in and buy this place and you put the stylus in and you kind of manage it. But then there was some where they actually insisted, no, you have to be an owner operator and you have to be in there. And she's like, why would they ever do that? That's not what a franchise is about. How do you go about making sure that it is a right fit for your type of personality? Or, because some people say, well, this is my passion, I'm going to do a scuba diving franchise. And well,
right.
Sometimes a lot of times passions don't pan out.
Yeah. And that's a fantastic point. I would say more often than not that's the case. I love it when a client, and I always ask the question up front of a new client that I start working with. I try to drill down on what's most important to them, what they want to accomplish, what their goals are in this. So I always ask the question. There's two distinctly different type of people. One type of person, for lack of a better term, I call them ideologues. These are people who are interested in a certain type of business because they have a passion for it. Maybe people love their dogs, so they want to be in some pet-related business. It doesn't matter to them if they make much money doing it. As long as they can do that activity, it's going to make them happy. On the other end of the spectrum, I have what I call my show me the money people. Often franchise investors, they own other franchises. They're savvy about franchising. They're looking for ROI, earnings. They don't care what the widget is as long as it's something that's ethical, provides a valued service to the community. And 9 times out of 10, they're looking for something that's semi-passive. And I always ask the client, which one on the spectrum do you fall closer to? I'd prefer to work with the latter one that is looking for ROI, earnings, and it's not focused on the widget. Because if you get into something, and you probably know the book, The E-Myth, and it talks about this, if you get into something that you might be passionate about, you may learn to hate your passion if it becomes a grind, right? And so I'm always cognizant of that when talking to a candidate. If making money is important to you, let's perhaps just try to keep an open mind, put your passion on the back burner, and let's look at things first and foremost that you're going to be able to make a living with.
How hard is it for you to, because sometimes these the people that come to you, if they're not looking for their passion, but one of the things is I want to sell cupcakes. for instance, and there's some franchises out there and they want to put it in a high rent district. And I'm thinking, it's like, how many thousands of cupcakes do you have to sell just to break even? Is that something that you guide them through? It's like, look, you can't go into a $40 square foot place and sell cupcakes, or it may not work out that way.
Exactly. And often it's not just 40, it's 60, it's 80, it's $100 a square feet. Brick and mortar retail, for some concepts, it works. For other concepts, it becomes a grind because of the overhead that you're carrying. Mm-hmm. Again, there's over 4,000 different franchise concepts out there. Honestly, I wouldn't go near 2/3 of them. They scare me. But there's some really good concepts that people can get into if they know where to look. Now, having listened to a couple of your podcasts, you said something that was very insightful. Don't try to do this on your own when you talked about real estate. And I would counsel anybody the same thing. It is too easy to make a mistake. And I will tell you, if I didn't just get damn lucky on my first franchise, I could have made a major mistake. I on the second franchise that I chose, it wasn't probably the best. If I had somebody to work with like myself that had the experience in the industry, just really didn't exist back then, I probably would have been a heck of a lot better off. And it's a shame because so many people get into franchising not knowing what they're really getting into and end up getting burned with it. But if you get into the right franchise concept, there's some phenomenal opportunities out there.
So let's talk about what your sweet zone is. In your notes, there's some excellent opportunities that you're saying you get into for under $200,000, and they're pretty lucrative. What type of franchises are those?
Yeah, so the category that is reasonably priced, and there's great opportunities in the category, is anything having to do with what's called the home service category. Now, that's a catch-all category. There's things in there that are B2B, and often many of the things that are B2C also cross over into B2B. But just as an example, I have placed over the course of the last year and a half a lot of my clients into something that you want to talk about boring. It's a gutter concept. They install gutters on homes, buildings, what have you. But the average franchisee, and I can't talk about numbers on this, but they knock it out of the park. And the investment on this concept is in that 150 to 200K range. What I like about these types of concepts is that for instance, if you looked at like an Orange Theory, or you looked at a Crumble Cookie, which these are two real popular franchises, right? You're going to spend somewhere between $750 to $1 million to open one. If you open a second one, $750 to $1 million. If you open a third one, $750 to $1 million, whereby I like things that are scalable at a lower cost, that you're really, for instance, like that gutter concept that I mentioned. And again, not that I'm going to show someone a gutter concept, but they may like it. But that gutter concept, it might be $150K to open one territory up and running with that concept. The second territory with that concept is $40,000. So you're buying a second franchise, you're just buying more dirt. A third franchise is $30,000. So now you tripled the size of your territory, in effect, tripling what your financial upside can be. And you have, by scaling that way, horizontally scaling, you just created something that can outperform an Orange Theory that you would have spent much, much more money for. But then there's also with this category of franchising, an opportunity to scale vertically. Now, what I mean by that is, someone can decide that, let's say you're 2 years into operating your gutter business and you decide, you know what, I want to launch another business. I developed this customer base that knows and trusts my first brand. I want to introduce another concept to them. You can add a second franchise, let's say, for lack of a better one, a fencing concept, and just superimpose it. You buy the same territory with the fencing franchise, superimpose it on the same landmass, introduce that concept to the customer base that already knows and trusts your first concept. You're gaining economies of scale. Your cost of customer acquisition is going down. You're just running a more efficient business. Now you can start to scale into multiple concepts over time. That's where I'm seeing the real movement with franchise investors. Savvy people, been in franchising, used to be just brick and mortar retail. Now seismic shift coming over to categories like that.
Yeah, and I think that's an important concept, especially if you don't have to just spend so much up front. And let's discuss a little bit about when my wife was looking at franchises. I was just amazed of the franchise costs. It's just the nickel and diming every month, and then marketing, and then national sales and marketing, and then tech support. It just went on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
On the nickel and diming. How can you talk a little bit about that and how you overcome that, or go ahead. It's
that great point, and that is often a stumbling block with a lot of my clients. But it really depends upon the franchise, because some companies, they overcharge fees. There's just too much in it. But the ones that do it right, those types of fees are pass-throughs. They're not making money on those things. Okay, if you had to go out and acquire those services to do the same things that these franchise companies are providing to you, you would typically pay much more. As an example, a lot of companies now have set up national call centers. So let's say, for instance, with that gutter concept, again, just an example, you plug into their prescribed marketing and advertising that they already have down to a science, they know works. The phone starts to ring, the emails start to come in. Rather than you having staff that answers the phone, you can't do it with one person. You need redundancy. You need to cover all the hours. People get sick, people leave. So you need multiple people to do that. So what this company does is they have a national call center. So all those calls and emails go directly to the call center. The call center turns that into an appointment for your salesperson. They're on the same software platform that you have. They see the schedule of your salesperson or your salespeople. They schedule for them. Your salesperson goes out, wins the job, and schedules the labor. So that's one example. Another example would be there's one of the companies that I work with. They have 7 brands in their portfolio, all service-related brands, but they literally bought their own recruiting company. So they charge a fee of $2,000 upfront, $1,995 upfront. And I actually had a recruiter who came into that system, became a franchisee with them, and she said that would have cost me $25,000 to hire the people through an agency that they just brought to me for $2,000. So you gain economies of scale. The better companies, those types of things are just purely pass-throughs. They're not making money on them. The better franchise companies make money in one area, and that's their royalty fee that they charge. Most companies are actually losing money up front, the ones that are doing it right, because of what it takes to launch a new franchise, a new franchisee, because of the resources and the investment they need to make into the franchisee. As time goes on, a year or 2 years down the line, they're putting very little effort into them at that point.
Yeah. And that makes sense. It's the investment up front for these people, and they want you to succeed because of the cost of training.
Correct. And they have a vested interest in your success. I mean, they're earning their money based on the volume that you do. So if they're, considering a couple different franchisees for the same market, which often happens with the ones that are selling quickly, they're going to choose the franchisee or the prospective franchisee that they feel can generate $3 million from this territory, as opposed to the one that they feel would generate maybe $1 million from this territory. And that's where I can help candidates that I work with. Look, I've been in the industry forever. These franchise companies know me. They want to keep me happy too, and they want me to continue to bring people to them. So often my candidates will get first preference over, if I run into a competitive situation for a territory, my candidates usually win out.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about your website, and everybody, it is franchisewithbob.com. We've been talking about some franchises. We've been talking about some pros and cons. Let's talk about what you do. If one of our listeners says, hey, I want to talk with Bob, let's talk about your program and what happens when someone reaches out to you.
Okay. Well, anybody can go to my website, franchisewithbob.com, and they can schedule a call with me. The first call that I typically spend with a candidate is a getting to know you call, 20 to 30 minutes. And that's exactly what it is, a getting to know you call. I'm trying to assess your situation to see if it makes sense for us to work together.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, my service is free to any candidate that I work with. If you qualify and we work together, my service is free. I'm compensated by franchise companies for bringing qualified candidates to them. If you can imagine, most of these companies, or a lot of them, they advertise online on portals. They pay to be on portals. 95% of the people coming to them through their portals end up not being qualified. So the better companies typically work with someone like me, because anybody I put in front of them, they will be fully qualified for their concept. And so if you're a candidate that I work with and we take you through the process and they approve you for a franchise and you go forward with the franchise, then they will compensate me at the end of that process. So to answer your question, if I engage with someone, if it makes sense for us to work together, we'll probably spend 8, 10, 12, maybe 14 weeks together. Okay. And I take you through a structured process. The first step is a confidential questionnaire. It's going to take you maybe 20, 30 minutes to complete, but that gives me the initial information I need on a candidate to start doing my job properly. We would schedule a consultation, which would spend about an hour on a Zoom call together. Mm-hmm. And I will review the confidential questionnaire together. I'll have lots of questions for you. I'm basically building a profile of who you are. So once that call is completed, I digest all the information that I collected. I put together usually a 2 or 3 page profile. I use that to start matching people with concepts that I think will be a good fit. I may start out with my, several dozen different concepts that I think will be a good fit, and I do my territory checks in the area. I actually have a list of what I consider some of my favorite brands that I would consider investing in. There's 71, I think, on that list now. And again, I'm on that far right of the list. ROI, earnings, don't care what the widget is, looking for semi-absentee, as long as it's ethical, provides a valued service to the community. So I automatically do a check on my top brands that I really like. And then I also include brands that my candidate's steering me towards. So then on the next Zoom call that we do, and that one typically will take about 75 minutes, I'll probably have it narrowed down to maybe a half dozen or so brands that I will introduce to them. On that call, we'll go through each brand. I will have sent them to them in an email prior to the call. We'll review each one. I'll answer any questions they have on those brands. I'll give you my opinion on the brands. And then we'll try to isolate it down to start with maybe 2, possibly 3 to take a deeper dive into. And then once we do that, I make an introduction to those. I introduce my candidate to those brands, which means I send the brand's information on my candidate. I also call the brands and explain why this candidate's going to make a great asset to their organization, because I'm trying to position them to be approved by the franchise. The company will reach out to the candidate right away by email. They'll send them a calendar link to schedule a time for a Zoom time, but they'll send them a whole bunch of information that they can review in the meantime. Once they engage with the brand and they start to go through a discovery process to learn about the brand and for the brand to learn about them, I'm talking to my candidates usually a couple times a week. We're just talking on a regular basis. That's why I really can't take on too many candidates at once. It becomes kind of overwhelming for me. So I try to keep it to a limit of a reasonable amount, and consequently, and I also want to work with people I like. And so if we click, I'll work with the candidate. If they don't appreciate what I'm bringing to the table, then I often don't, because again, I mean, this is such a valuable service. I wish I had it when I broke into franchising, and it's absolutely free to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and why not do it, right? It's like what I always say about the mentorship and just business consultants, all this sort of stuff. You need to get help because You're either going to spend money one way or you're going to spend money the other way. And I'd rather spend money winning,
Right. Exactly.
instead of failing. Speaking of failing, industry news and things like that say a great percentage of people who go into franchising fail. Various reasons. What are some of the reasons that you see that maybe you could tell our listeners is like, look, this is why people fail. This is what you need to do to make sure that to help you succeed.
Okay, so let's touch on that. That's important. From a statistical standpoint, there was a study done by the Chamber of Commerce a number of years back, and they basically tracked a whole bunch of independent mom and pop businesses that all opened around the same time. They tracked them for a 5-year period. They concurrently tracked a whole bunch of franchises, different franchises that opened around that same period of time for that same concurrent 5-year period. At the end of 5 years, the independent businesses, 48% were still up and operating, which actually surprised me. I didn't think it was going to be that high. Of the franchises, 97% were actually still in operation. Now, some of them have turned over and had different ownership at that point, but still 97% were still in operation. Now, some may have not been making money at that point. Some may have been breaking even. It is easy to make a mistake and choose the wrong franchise, but there are incredibly strong opportunities as well. The reason why people fail in franchising, if it's a good system and the preponderance of franchisees are succeeding in that system, the reason somebody fails, there's either there's some extenuating circumstances. There's illness, there's divorce, there's death. I actually had a candidate, God bless his soul, he died. He signed up for a franchise, died, and his wife didn't want to run it, and she contacted me right away, and we helped her get it sold. But if it's a reputable company with a strong model, there's no way that you shouldn't succeed if the preponderance of franchisees are succeeding, unless and the companies are also, the better ones are pretty selective with who they accept as franchisees. I mean, often people get turned down by it. So if they think you can succeed and you have the capital to do this properly, they'll approve you.
Now, in any type of business, when you go into working for yourself, you need a team. And I'm a big proponent of a team. What kind of a team do franchise owners need that from day one you need, the bookkeeper, the accounting, the attorney, these type of team? And where is that checklist to kind of like make sure, hey, you got to have this insurance, you got to do this, you got to have correct accounting. What are who are the team members that franchise owners need?
Yeah, well, and that's a great question also. I mean, I always, I have some franchise attorneys. I always recommend, more for peace of mind than anything else, franchise companies aren't going to make changes to their franchise agreement. In some cases, when it comes to territory, there may be some negotiating room and so forth, but it's always good to talk with a franchise attorney, just so, if nothing else, for peace of mind. You do not want to use an attorney that's not a franchise attorney. You'll end up spending more money because they're going to educate themselves on your dime, and often they're going to make mistakes. So use a franchise attorney. An accountant evaluating the business, I would say not so much. I think a good accountant, once you get into the business, so you can maximize the tax ramifications of having a business. And obviously there's a lot of benefit to being able to have tax benefits to having a business. But the franchise companies, also the better ones, they will have a list. They'll have a whole bunch of people that they will connect you with, or I should say, partners that they're going to connect you with. Franchising today is a business in a box, at least with the better companies. Anything that you could possibly think of in terms of setting up an entity, and they will give you guidance with that. And I can certainly give guidance with that. I mean, and it might be some differences in the entity you set up depending upon how your capital you're capitalizing your company. For instance, if you're going to do a 401k rollover, basically take funds from your 401k or an IRA if eligible to do it without extracting funds. You're basically rolling funds from your 401k or IRA into a business without taxation, without penalty, without interest. But it has to be done in a certain way. It has to roll into a C corp. So there's entities that will help you set that up and then make sure you stay in compliance with it. Did I answer your question, or did I ramble?
Yeah, no, you did. I was just seeing how it compared, because a lot of people, when they go into business for themselves, I need to save money, so they try to do everything themselves, and they don't delegate, and that gets a lot of people in trouble. Yep. And it causes burnout.
Yep, absolutely. The better franchise companies, the last thing they want you doing is whatever the service actually is. They want you building and scaling a business. If you, I'll give you a perfect example. I mean, you go back 30 years, there was a great company, very, very successful service company in franchising called CertaPro Painters. Mm-hmm. Their initial model was to seek out painters and make them franchisees. They quickly discovered that was a horrible idea. Painters did not make good franchisees. So then they reset, looked at their model, evaluated and reset, and decided, hey, we're just going to look for smart people that have people skills, that have the financial wherewithal to execute upon our model, and they're driven people. Mm-hmm. Their concept just blew up after that, and they were wildly successful. And the companies, the last thing you want to do is be chained to whatever the business is. I mean, look, what I do now with that's why I also invest in franchises, because I want to eventually back off what I'm doing, because this is linear income. When I do it, I make money. If I stop doing it, I stop making money. When you're doing a job, you're making money. When you stop doing it, you stop making money. With a franchise, the whole point is, in my opinion, get it launched. Maybe you put some time into it to get it going, but as it develops, you're putting less and less time into it, and you're scaling it larger and larger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Bob. So where else can people find you?
Just simply go to my website at franchisewithbob.com. You can book right on there some time with me if you want to have a discussion. We'll spend 20, 30 minutes together. We'll assess your situation pretty quickly, and we'll see if it makes sense for us to work together. If we do, if it makes sense, we'll embark on a journey for the next 8, 10, 12, 14 weeks, and hopefully we can find you really something great in franchising.
See, everybody, don't do it yourself. Don't wonder what kind of franchises. If you're interested, even in the concept of possibly owning a franchise, why not get a free consultation with Bob at franchisewithbob.com? Just alleviate some of the questions, and it may persuade you to not do it or to do it. But anyway, always get help with the experts. Bob, I appreciate you coming on today, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Hey, Mike, it's been my pleasure. Have a good one.
Yep, take care.